They thought he was just the janitor, until he picked up the chalk and solved the problem that silenced the room. They called him Marcus, Mr. Bennett, if they bothered to ask, but most didn't. At Ridgeview High, he was just the janitor, a silhouette in coveralls, a silent broom across polished floors. No one cared about the man beneath the uniform, until the day someone laughed. It was a Tuesday, early spring. The halls still smelled faintly of disinfectant, and outside, dew clung to the chain-link fences like forgotten promises. Marcus had arrived, as always, before sunrise. He wiped down windows, mopped the cafeteria tiles, and restocked paper towels. He didn't complain. He didn't even hum. Work for him was rhythm. Safe. Predictable. But room 3B, advanced calculus, was different. Marcus lingered there longer than usual, sweeping slowly past the cracked door as Mr. Carter scribbled a monstrous integral across the board. Inside, the students groaned. Equations climbed the chalk like ivy. Marcus paused for only a second, eyes catching the arc of a symbol. Nested integrals, complex boundaries. Familiar. Painfully so. That pause was his mistake. "Mr. Bennett!" Mr. Carter's voice boomed, slicing the room in half. Marcus turned. The students turned, too. "You've been hanging around long enough," Carter smirked. "You probably know more calculus than these kids by now." A few snickers, one loud laugh from the back. Carter gestured to the board with an exaggerated bow. "Come, show us what you've learned mopping up knowledge." Marcus stood still for a long, long beat. Then he stepped forward. One foot, then another. The room fell into a hush. The janitor was walking in, not to clean, not to collect trash, but toward the blackboard, toward the problem. Carter blinked. "Seriously?" he muttered, now less confident. Marcus didn't answer. He picked up a piece of chalk. It trembled in his hand, not from fear, but from time. He hadn't held one in 20 years. Then he began. First a substitution, then an identity. The board whispered beneath his strokes. Students leaned forward. The laughter died. A girl in the second row, Autumn Clark, the class valedictorian, lowered her phone, transfixed. Marcus's handwriting was neat, elegant. His reasoning, step by step, flawless. Mr. Carter's smirk melted. In 5 minutes, the impossible was no longer unsolved. It was complete. Marcus underlined the answer, placed the chalk down, and said simply, "This is what you were looking for." He turned to leave. No one clapped. No one spoke. The silence was not of confusion, it was reverence. Reverence for something they could not unsee. Autumn whispered softly, "That was beautiful." And in that moment, Marcus Bennett was no longer the man who cleaned their floors. He was the man who rewrote what it meant to be seen. The day after Marcus solved the calculus problem, room 3B felt different. The usual hum of indifference had been replaced with a quiet reverence. Students entered early, their eyes drawn not to Mr. Carter but to the chalkboard where the equation once lived, and where Marcus had made the impossible feel simple. It wasn't erased. Mr. Carter hadn't dared to. Autumn Clark stood in front of the board longer than anyone else. Her eyes followed each line of Marcus's work, not just memorizing the steps, but searching for the thinking beneath them. She'd been top of her class for years, but this moved her. It was like listening to music in a language she'd never learned but somehow understood. When Mr. Carter entered, the students went quiet. He looked at them, then at Autumn. "Please be seated," he said curtly. Class began. He taught, but the magic was gone. Not because Marcus had outshined him, but because something had shifted in the way the students looked at knowledge itself. Later that day, Autumn saw Marcus by the lockers near the science wing. He was fixing a broken lock. "Mr. Bennett?" she asked. He turned slowly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I've been thinking about what you did in class. I didn't just want to say it was impressive, I wanted to understand it." He studied her expression. It wasn't curiosity. It was hunger. "I brought my notes," she said, holding up her spiral-bound notebook. "Would you look?" He hesitated, then nodded. She sat on the floor. He sat next to her. Students walked past, puzzled, but no one interrupted. For 15 minutes, he went over her method, gently correcting her assumptions, reframing her intuition. It was the most she'd ever learned in 15 minutes. The next morning, she was back, this time with 2 classmates. Then 5. By the end of the week, 10 students were meeting Marcus in the cafeteria before class, asking questions. Mr. Carter noticed. So did Principal Harris. She pulled Autumn aside. "What's this I hear about Marcus teaching math before school?" Autumn didn't flinch. "He's not teaching. We're just asking questions." "And he answers?" "Yes. Better than anyone I've heard." That night, Principal Harris stayed late. She walked the halls around 6:30 p.m. and found Marcus alone in room 3B. He was looking at a dusty chalkboard at the back of the room, solving something long abandoned. "You never stopped doing math, did you?" she asked. He shook his head. "I never stopped needing it," he replied. She stood silently for a moment, then said, "I think the kids need it too." He looked at her, unsure what that meant. "Keep going," she added softly, "until someone tells you not to." That moment marked the beginning of something Marcus didn't expect. A community. Students who had never spoken up in math class began raising their hands. Some began staying after school. One even asked Marcus to help him prep for the SAT. They didn't call it tutoring. They called it the quiet hour. And yet not everyone was quiet about it. A few parents began to murmur. One email to Mr. Carter read, "Why is the janitor helping my child with trigonometry? Aren't we paying teachers for that?" Others defended it. Autumn's mother wrote to the principal, "My daughter hasn't smiled after math class in 2 years. Whatever Mr. Bennett is doing, it's working." Marcus, meanwhile, remained humble. He still mopped floors at dawn, still fixed windows, restocked paper towels, scrubbed graffiti off lockers. But each day, more students greeted him with nods, and some, like Leo, the shy sophomore, began bringing questions folded into napkins, tucked into Marcus's mop bucket. It wasn't just the math, it was how he made them feel. Like they belonged. Like their questions mattered. Like silence didn't mean ignorance, but potential waiting to be noticed. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning. It wasn't typed. It wasn't emailed. It was handwritten in sharp, slanted cursive on thick, expensive paper. The envelope was sealed with a wax stamp, an affectation Principal Harris found unnecessary but telling. People who use wax seals typically want you to feel small before you even open the message. The handwriting was familiar. Gerald Whitlock, school board chair, wealthy, powerful, and very uncomfortable with anything he couldn't control. She read the letter 3 times. It was polite, courteous, and unmistakably a warning. "We have received word that a member of the janitorial staff is engaging in instructional activities during school hours. While we commend Ridgeview's commitment to academic excellence, we must remind all schools in the district that certified roles exist for a reason." It ended with a request. "Please clarify the nature and scope of Mr. Marcus Bennett's engagement with students." A review may be forthcoming. Principal Harris leaned back in her chair. Her office windows overlooked the courtyard, where a group of juniors were setting up posters for Spirit Week. Down the hall, she could hear laughter from room 3B. Marcus's voice carried, not loudly but clearly, with authority, like someone who belonged. She sighed. The review wouldn't wait long. That afternoon, she found Marcus in the maintenance hallway, organizing supplies. He looked up at her, expression unreadable. "They've noticed," she said. "I figured they would," he replied. "They're asking for boundaries, definitions, whether you're teaching or just inspiring." Marcus set down the clipboard. "I'm not giving lectures. I'm answering questions." "I know," Harris replied. "But some people don't see the difference. Especially not when students are showing up early to hear you talk about logarithmic spirals." He smiled faintly. "That was Autumn's question." "I know," Harris said, then added, "She submitted an essay to the math journal. She quoted you." That made Marcus pause. She said, "Learning from Mr. Bennett is like hearing math spoken in a language I forgot I already knew." He looked down. Quiet. She waited. Finally, he said, "Do I stop?" "No," she answered. But even as she said it, they both knew it wasn't that simple. That weekend, a local education blog published an anonymous op-ed titled, "When Janitors Teach, What Are We Teaching?" The article accused Ridgeview of romanticizing rebellion and blurring lines between inspiration and overreach. By Monday morning, it had been shared over 3,000 times. Autumn read it 3 times during breakfast. Each sentence felt like a slap. When she arrived at school, the usual buzz around room 3B had dimmed. Some students avoided eye contact. A few teachers didn't greet Marcus in the hallway, but others rallied. Autumn found a sticky note on her locker. "Thank you for standing up." Leo, a shy sophomore who once failed algebra, showed her a drawing he made, Marcus holding a chalkboard with vines of equations growing like branches. Principal Harris, meanwhile, met privately with Gerald Whitlock over coffee. He was cordial but firm. "I respect your passion, Regina," he said, "but we must maintain the sanctity of roles. A janitor stepping into a classroom, even with good intentions, sets the wrong precedent." "What if the right precedent doesn't come with a job title?" she asked. Whitlock frowned. "That's not policy." She didn't argue, but she didn't back down either. Later that day, Marcus walked past room 3B and found the lights off. A student sat alone on the floor outside. "Everything okay?" he asked. The boy, Jaden, nodded. "Mr. Carter canceled class today. Said it was best to pause." Marcus said nothing. Jaden looked up. "But I didn't want to miss what we were building." Marcus leaned against the wall. "Neither do I." By that evening, over 24 students had signed an informal letter to the school board titled, "Let Him Speak." The movement wasn't loud, but it was growing. And deep down, Marcus knew, the louder the silence around him became, the more powerful the truth he carried would need to be. The meeting was set for Tuesday night. Officially, it was called a board personnel review session. Unofficially, everyone knew what it meant. Marcus Bennett's future at Ridgeview High was on trial. By Monday afternoon, the news had spread far beyond the walls of the school. Students whispered in the halls. Teachers exchanged glances. The cafeteria buzzed with rumors. Autumn Clark stood by the vending machine listening to 2 juniors speculate. "I heard they're gonna fire him." "No way! He's not even a real teacher. What can they fire?" Autumn clenched her jaw. She didn't correct them. Not yet. Instead, she walked back to room 3B, where Marcus sat alone, cleaning the whiteboard that had been idle since Mr. Carter's sudden leave. "Mr. Bennett," she said gently. He looked up, his eyes tired but calm. "I want to speak at the hearing." Marcus didn't answer immediately. He set down the eraser, turned to face her fully. "They might not let you," he said. "They'll listen," she replied. He looked at her, at the resolve in her voice, and nodded. "You speak for more than just yourself now," he said. Tuesday arrived like a storm held just behind the clouds. The district office auditorium had never seen a crowd like this. Every seat was filled. Parents stood along the back wall. Teachers, community members, even news reporters holding quiet cameras filed in with notebooks and expectant eyes. On stage sat the board members. 5 faces of varied age and tone, with Gerald Whitlock at the center, stern as ever. Principal Harris sat in the front row, lips pressed tight. And in the second row, Marcus Bennett waited. He wore his cleanest navy work shirt. His name patch, stitched in white, gleamed under the auditorium lights. His hands were folded, steady. The session opened with formality. Whitlock read from a prepared statement. "We are gathered to review a concern brought forth by members of the Ridgeview community regarding the engagement of classified staff in instructional roles beyond their contractual scope." Words like protocol and liability peppered the air. Then came the moment. "Mr. Bennett," Whitlock said, "you may address the board." Marcus stood slowly. He didn't walk to the podium. He stood where he was, row 2, aisle seat, under the fluorescent glare. "I didn't ask to teach," he said, voice low but clear. "I was asked questions. I gave answers. That's all." A murmur stirred. Someone coughed. Whitlock lifted a hand. "I know I'm not certified," Marcus continued, "but I am educated. I'm experienced. And above all, I care. About math. About young minds. About what it means when someone finally feels like they're not invisible." He glanced at Autumn. "I didn't walk into a classroom to change the system, but maybe the system needs a little changing." He sat down, and the room held its breath. Then, from the audience, Autumn stood. "My name is Autumn Clark," she said. "I'm valedictorian of the senior class, and before last week I thought I understood mathematics. I didn't." She held up her notebook. "This man showed me that math isn't just equations. It's a way of seeing. And he saw us. All of us." She turned to the board. "If Ridgeview High loses him, we lose more than a janitor. We lose one of the best teachers we've ever had." Leo stood next. He didn't speak. He just held up a drawing, a chalkboard, a spiral, and the words, "You made me believe I could." Others followed, one by one. Jaden, a junior named Emma. Even Mr. Carter, surprising everyone, stepped forward. "I underestimated him," Carter said. "I misjudged what teaching really is." By the time the final voice spoke, even Whitlock's pen had stopped scribbling. The board excused themselves to deliberate. 30 minutes passed, then they returned. Whitlock stood. "We appreciate the input," he said, his voice unreadable. "This board acknowledges Mr. Bennett's contribution to student engagement. However," the room tensed, "we must uphold professional standards. Mr. Bennett will not be permitted to continue academic instruction without certification." Gasps. Whispers. "But," Whitlock added, "should he choose to pursue certification, this board is willing to sponsor the process fully, beginning immediately." Silence again. But this time, it pulsed. Marcus stood once more. "I didn't ask for a teaching job," he said. "But I won't walk away from what's begun." He nodded once. Let's begin the paperwork. The room erupted, not in chaos, but in something more powerful. Hope. The certification process began the following week. There were forms, background checks, official transcripts from a college Marcus had left decades ago. But for the first time in years, Marcus filled out paperwork not for maintenance supplies, but for himself. He sat in the corner of the Ridgeview Library one afternoon, fingers steady, reading through pages of requirements and exams. Around him, the hum of students working made him smile. He wasn't just cleaning the building anymore. He was becoming part of it. Principal Harris arranged for a temporary mentorship position while his certification went through. Marcus would be allowed to sit in on math classes, assist during problem-solving periods, and run his now-beloved quiet hour. But the school gave him something else, too. Room 2D. It had no number on the door. It used to be a storage room, just shelves and dust. But now, with a fresh coat of paint, 2 whiteboards, and a small round table with mismatched chairs, it was his. When Marcus stepped into that room for the first time, he didn't say a word. He simply placed a stick of chalk on the tray and sat down. Within days, it became a second home, for him, and for students who needed a space where questions weren't met with size or grades, but curiosity. Leo came first. I brought the Fibonacci problem, he said, setting his notebook down like it was treasure. Marcus smiled. Let's see where it leads us. Then Autumn. Then Jaden. Then 2 freshman girls who didn't even like math, but liked how it felt to be listened to. One wall slowly filled with hand-drawn graphs, timelines, and colored string connecting ideas. Above the whiteboard, a student painted words in blue. Ask it anyway. But not all questions stayed inside that room. A month into his mentorship, Marcus received an invitation. It came from the Department of Education, an initiative to highlight community-based learning models. They want you to speak, Principal Harris said. I'm not a speaker, Marcus replied. You weren't a teacher either, she smiled. Until you were. He agreed. The event took place in a modest downtown auditorium. No cameras, just folding chairs, warm lights, and a crowd of educators who knew what burnout looked like. Marcus stood with a small notebook in his hand. He didn't read from it. He simply said, Sometimes a student isn't looking for the right answer. They're looking for someone who won't laugh when they don't have one. He paused. I was invisible for a long time, until a student saw me, and I remembered who I was. There was no applause, not at first, just silence. The kind that wraps around something important. Then a single clap, then a wave, not for performance, but for truth. Back at Ridgeview, Room 2D became known as the room with no number. Students left notes in the doorframe. I passed my exam, thank you. Can I talk during lunch? I didn't get it. Can we try again? Marcus replied to everyone. He still mopped the cafeteria on Fridays, still fixed the projector in the auditorium when it jammed. But now, when he walked through the halls, students didn't just move aside. They nodded. They smiled. They asked questions. And one spring morning, he found a new sign taped to the outside of Room 2D. Handwritten. Taped with care. Mr. Bennett's room, where math feels like belonging. He didn't take it down. He just walked in, picked up a stick of chalk, and began again. Late May brought the kind of southern heat that curled papers at the edges and made students long for the last bell of the year. Ridgeview High's end-of-year festivities were underway. Sports banquets, college announcement boards, music recitals, but none of them had the gravity of what was coming in Room 2D. A small group of seniors had nominated Mr. Bennett's space for their capstone math project, a collaborative, open-format presentation that would serve as their final grade. Their theme? Connection. It was Autumn's idea. "I want to show them math isn't just about numbers," she told Marcus. "It's about what links us. Ideas, people, questions." So they got to work. Leo built a timeline of historical mathematical breakthroughs that paralleled civil rights milestones. Jaden created a 3D model of a suspension bridge, explaining how equations hold real-world tension. Autumn wrote a poem called "The Other Side of the Board," blending calculus metaphors with personal memory. Marcus helped them stitch it all together with patience and quiet pride. "It's not about proving you're smart," he reminded them. "It's about showing them why it matters." Word spread. On the morning of the presentation, room 2D was overflowing. Students sat on the floor. Teachers lined the back wall. Even custodians poked in between shifts. Then someone unexpected arrived. Gerald Whitlock, the same board chair who had nearly ended Marcus's teaching journey 2 months prior. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. And then, as Autumn began her poem, he stepped inside. "There are chalkboards with limits we don't erase, problems we inherit, questions we chase." She spoke of Marcus, of erasers that don't clean history, of formulas as bridges, not barriers. When she finished, the room stayed still. Then Whitlock did something no one expected. He clapped, just once, then again. Then others joined. Afterward, he waited by the door. When Marcus passed him, he extended a hand. "I owe you an apology," Whitlock said. Marcus hesitated, then took it. "I never wanted your apology," he replied. "Just your belief." Whitlock nodded. "You have it now." The next morning, Principal Harris called Marcus into her office. "You're approved for full classroom instruction beginning next semester," she said. "Tenure track, math faculty." Marcus blinked. "I don't even have a suit," he said. "You have everything else." He left her office with a paper folder in hand, a formal offer. But just outside her door, a secretary caught up to him, face pale. "Mr. Bennett, this just came in." She handed him a printout. A single email, unsigned. "If Ridgeview insists on making janitors into teachers, don't be surprised when parents pull their kids out. There are standards for a reason." Marcus stood frozen. For a moment, the folder in his hand felt heavier than any mop he'd ever carried. That afternoon, Marcus returned to room 2D. The students were gone, but the bridge remained, Jaden's model, strung between 2 chairs with fishing line and cardboard tension. He sat before it and just watched. Somewhere, a janitor's cart squeaked down the hall. He didn't move. Then, from the doorway, a quiet voice. "You're still our teacher." It was Autumn. She stepped into the room and placed her poem on the table next to the bridge. But her eyes, usually bright, held something else now. Fear. Because sometimes the greatest obstacles aren't equations. They're the people who refuse to believe you should be allowed to solve them. The envelope sat untouched on Principal Harris's desk for nearly 2 days. It was anonymous, written in sharp black ink with no return address. The only thing on the front, "To whom it may concern." She had meant to open it Monday morning, but the bell rang, then a fire drill, then back-to-back meetings, and then, somewhere between signing yearbook forms and ordering new bleachers, she forgot. Until Wednesday morning. She slid her finger along the seal, tore the flap carefully, and unfolded the paper. It wasn't a complaint. It was a confession. "I'm sorry I ever doubted him. My son struggled in math for years. We tried tutors, private help. Nothing clicked. Then one day he asked me if it was okay to stay after class. "Mr. Bennett helps us," he said. I didn't know who he meant. I was ashamed when I found out it was the janitor. I told him we could find someone more qualified, but he begged me not to. So I stayed silent. That was 4 months ago. My son now loves math. He's confident, happy. I don't know what kind of teacher he is on paper, but I know what kind of teacher he is in my child's life. Please, let him stay. There was no signature. Harris folded the letter gently and placed it in her top drawer. For the first time that morning, she smiled. But she also knew the timing was dangerous, because the school board had called an emergency session, and someone had forwarded the other letter, the anonymous threat, to the press. By 3 p.m., Ridgeview High was in the news. Local anchors stood outside the school gate, interviewing students and parents about the janitor who might become a teacher. Words like unlicensed, uncredentialed, and inappropriate precedent began to circulate. Online, it got worse. Photos of Marcus from yearbook pages, him mopping halls, smiling with Autumn's club, were lifted and spread on social media, captioned with phrases like, "Would you trust this man to teach your child?" And below those posts, hundreds of comments, some in support, many not. Marcus didn't look at them. He spent the afternoon in the supply closet, reorganizing brooms. "I'm not hiding," he told himself. But deep down, he was. Until someone knocked on the door. It was Jaden, and Leo, and Autumn. Each carried something. Jaden held a folder of math test scores. Leo had a poster with "We Trust Mr. Bennett" in bold red letters. Autumn had something folded in her arms, a white hoodie with Room 2D stenciled on the back. "It's for tomorrow," she said. "We're speaking at the hearing." Marcus blinked. "You... what?" "You told us math is about connection," Jaden said. "This is us proving you right." He took the hoodie and didn't speak. Didn't have to. The school board meeting wasn't meant to be public, but the auditorium was packed anyway. Teachers, parents, students, reporters. Even janitorial staff from other schools had shown up in solidarity, some in uniform, their mop handles painted gold. The board sat stiffly in their suits. Marcus stood at the back, arms folded, expression unreadable. Then came the speakers, a retired math professor, a single mom, a former student, a janitor from another district, a teacher with tears in her eyes, each with the same message. We don't care what title he has. He's already doing the job. Let him teach. But just as the tide seemed to be turning, one voice stood up from the crowd. It was a woman in pearls and a tailored blue dress, her nameplate reading Cynthia Lowell, Parent Council President. She walked to the microphone, heels clicking, and adjusted her glasses. "I speak today not in hate," she began, "but in deep concern." She spoke of credentials, of policies, of maintaining excellence. She quoted articles, cited legal clauses, spoke for 8 minutes without mentioning Marcus's name once. But her final words hung like frost. Let us not confuse kindness with qualification. The crowd was silent. Then Autumn stepped forward. She wore the white hoodie, Room 2D across her back like a badge. She said nothing at first, just looked at Marcus. Then she turned to the board. "May I ask a question?" she said quietly. The chair nodded. "Would you rather have someone with a PhD who doesn't care? Or a janitor who stays after school every day to help kids like me not feel stupid?" No one answered. "I'll wait," she said. The silence was louder than any speech before it. Later that night, Marcus sat alone on the school steps. The hearing had ended with no vote. To be determined, they said. Policy review required. In other words, nothing yet. He looked up at the stars. He hadn't realized how clear the sky could be when you stopped trying to clean floors and just looked up. Then Autumn sat beside him. "You were brave today," she said. Marcus laughed softly. "I think you're confusing brave with tired." She smiled. "You once told me math was about the space between what we know and what we can prove. This," she gestured toward the school, "this is the space in between." He nodded. "And that means we're still solving." The days after the hearing were quiet, too quiet. No official email, no call from the district, no verdict. Students kept whispering, teachers avoided the topic in the lounge, and Marcus just kept working. He polished floors that didn't need polishing, replaced light bulbs that weren't out. He wasn't avoiding the truth. He just didn't know where to stand in it. Until Tuesday afternoon. He was cleaning the windows of the science lab when a knock tapped the glass from the inside. Principal Harris. "Marcus," she said, sliding the door open. "You have a visitor, downstairs, room 101. "Who is it?" She hesitated. "He didn't leave a name, but he's wearing a corduroy jacket and asked for Mr. Bennett, the boy who wouldn't stop asking why." Marcus froze. There was only one person who ever called him that. Room 101 was used for tutoring now, empty in the afternoons, a ghost of its former self. But today, someone waited at the front desk, an old man with a cane, a leather satchel, and hair the color of old paper. He turned when Marcus entered. "Still don't knock?" the man said with a smile. "Still don't say hello properly," Marcus replied. And then, like gravity never stopped pulling, Marcus walked straight into the man's arms. "Dr. Ralston," he whispered. It was his old high school math teacher, the man who let him stay after school when he had nowhere to go, the man who bought him his first calculator, the man who once said, "Someday, Marcus, you'll teach the world something it forgot." They sat by the window, 2 paper cups of burnt coffee between them. "I read about what's happening," Ralston said. "Almost didn't recognize your name, but I knew the story." Marcus looked out the window. "Funny, I wasn't even trying to be a teacher." Ralston chuckled. "That's exactly how the best ones start." There was a pause. Then Marcus asked, "Why now?" Ralston reached into his satchel. "I brought something." He laid a yellowed file on the desk. Inside were test scores, essays, letters, a faded photo of teenage Marcus solving an equation at the board, chalk in hand, eyes on fire. "I wrote a recommendation for you, 15 years ago, for a teaching fellowship," Ralston said. "I never applied to one." "I know. You never saw it. Your application was never submitted. The counselor at the time told me. It wasn't worth pushing." Marcus was quiet for a long time. "Do you still want to teach?" Ralston asked gently. "I don't know," Marcus whispered. I just want to belong." Ralston nodded. "That's what all great teachers want. Not power, just place." Later that night, the school board received a request, an official one. Dr. Walter Ralston, Ph.D., former state math educator of the year, wanted to speak at the next hearing. The subject line read, "The janitor you should have recognized a decade ago." They had no choice but to say yes. The next hearing wasn't held in the auditorium. It was moved to the district chamber, larger, formal, televised. Marcus didn't want to go. He didn't even own a tie. But Autumn handed him one. "It's Jaden's," she said. "He says it's a lucky one. He wore it when he passed calculus." So Marcus went. And this time, he didn't sit at the back. Dr. Ralston took the microphone like a conductor facing an orchestra. He didn't read from notes, didn't quote policy. He told a story of a boy in a broken neighborhood who solved problems faster than his teachers could write them, of how he was discouraged, not by math, but by life, of how the system failed him before he ever had a chance to apply, and how, despite all of it, that boy had become the teacher he was meant to be, without anyone's permission. Then he turned to the board and asked one question. What more does a man need to prove, if not this? Silence, until Whitlock cleared his throat. I think it's time we vote. The motion was read. Should Marcus Bennett be offered a full-time teaching position in the Ridgeview High Mathematics Department beginning fall semester? Hands raised, one by one, until all but one were in the air. Cynthia Lowell's stayed folded in her lap. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The vote passed. That night, back in room 2D, Marcus stood at the board alone. For the first time, there was nothing to clean. Autumn appeared at the door. You didn't even erase today's notes, she said. Marcus smiled. Didn't feel like erasing anything. She walked in, placed something on the desk. It was a framed photo. Marcus and the students in front of the bridge model, all smiling. Room 2D, April 23rd. I thought you might need something for your new desk. Marcus looked around. I've never had a room before. Autumn grinned. Well, welcome home, Mr. Bennett. It had been 3 weeks since Marcus became a teacher, officially. He now had a badge, a desk, an inbox overflowing with student emails, and a mug that read World's Okayest Math Teacher, a gift from Autumn, naturally. But something still felt unfinished. Not because the students doubted him. They didn't. They called him Mr. B with pride now, not sarcasm. He had his own whiteboard, his own coffee key. He even had colleagues. It wasn't Ridgeview that felt incomplete. It was Marcus himself. Every time he erased the board at the end of the day, a quiet thought lingered in the back of his mind. What if the best part of me is still trapped in the part they never asked to see? He tried to ignore it. Until one Thursday morning, a new student walked into his class, late. She was small, thin, wore headphones that dangled around her neck and sleeves pulled down past her wrists. Her name was Maya Reyes. Sorry, she mumbled, not looking up. That's all right, Marcus said gently. Math always forgives late arrivals. She didn't laugh. She didn't speak. She just sat. For 2 weeks, she barely said a word, never raised her hand, never smiled. But every time Marcus assigned a problem, her page filled faster than anyone's, until one day he handed back her test, 100% again, and whispered, You should be teaching this class. She finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, but burning. People don't want to hear it when I talk, she said. And just like that, something in Marcus broke open. That night, he stayed late in room 2D. The building was quiet, as it always had been. He opened the old storage closet behind the whiteboard, where he'd once kept mops and ammonia. But now, it held something different. Boxes filled with scribbled notes, old puzzles, a chalkboard he hadn't used in years. And then, tucked behind a shelf, he found something wrapped in plastic. A notebook. His father's. The one Marcus had never dared open. Until now. The pages were yellowed, the ink slightly smeared, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Calm, neat, deliberate. Equations, notes, graphs, and then paragraphs, letters, diary entries. Today, Marcus asked why we can't divide by 0. I told him because some questions don't have answers. He said, "That's not a reason." I think he's right. The night shift was long. I missed his school play. He says he doesn't mind, but I do. Someday he's going to become something more than this job. I just hope the world doesn't convince him otherwise. Marcus wiped his eyes, slowly. The lesson wasn't about math. It was about legacy. His father never had a classroom, never had a degree, but he had this, a quiet belief that knowledge wasn't something you had to prove. It was something you passed on. The next morning, Marcus changed the board. He didn't start with equations. He wrote just one question. What's something no one's ever asked you about, but you wish they had? There was silence. Then a hand, then another, and another. Maya wrote, "Why I stopped talking." Jaden wrote, "What it feels like when your dad leaves." Autumn wrote, "Why math saved me." The room shifted. No one reached for their calculators. Not at first. They were solving something else. Together. Later that week, Harris stopped Marcus in the hallway. "I heard about your board," she said. "Creative." He braced himself. "But brave," she added. "I think this school needs that." Then she handed him a flyer. Ridgeview Honors Gala. Nominate a faculty member who changed your life. Marcus almost laughed, but Harris just winked. "Don't be humble," she said. "Not this time." That Friday afternoon, Maya stayed behind after class. She didn't say much, just handed him something. A folded piece of paper. Marcus waited until she left to open it. It wasn't a letter. It was a drawing. 2 stick figures, one sweeping a hallway, one at a whiteboard. Above both, Mr. B. And beneath, "You were always a teacher, even when no one called you one." That night, Marcus went home, sat at his kitchen table, and finally wrote his first ever lesson plan. Not just for next week, for next year. Because he wasn't just filling in anymore. He was building something. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't unfinished after all. It was still unfolding, like a formula too big for one board, but just the right size for a lifetime. June at Ridgeview High had a way of pressing warmth into the walls, like the building itself was exhaling after a long, burdened year. The graduation gala was hosted in the gymnasium that now looked nothing like the place where dodgeballs once flew. Tonight, it shimmered. White lights strung across the ceiling like stars, round tables with navy blue linens, plates, not plastic trays. Marcus stood by the far wall, out of uniform, in a borrowed suit that hung loosely from his shoulders. He didn't wear ties, couldn't remember how to tie one anyway. Principal Harris stepped onto the stage. "We've added a new honor this year," she began. "The Ridgeview Beacon Award, for those who illuminate others without ever asking for the spotlight." The room stirred. "Please welcome Mr. Marcus Bennett." He didn't move. A soft hand touched his elbow. Autumn. "It's time," she whispered. He took the steps slowly. Students clapped first, then parents, then faculty. The applause swelled like a wave rolling toward shore. At the podium, Marcus looked out at the crowd, then at the note Harris had handed him with suggested remarks. He folded it, slipped it into his jacket. Then he said, "I'd like someone else to speak for me tonight." Murmurs. He turned to the front row. Autumn Clark, would you come up here? Autumn froze, then rose. She joined him, nervous, but resolute. She took the mic, looked at him. He nodded. I met Mr. Bennett not in a classroom, she began, but in a hallway, fixing a locker, and yet I've learned more from him than from any textbook. He didn't teach us just math, he taught us how to think, to trust our questions, to find our voice. She paused. I'm going to college next fall, studying to become a teacher, and this man, is why. The room broke into applause. One teacher wiped tears. Autumn continued, So no, he never gave a speech, because he didn't need to. His life is the lesson. Marcus stepped back. He never said another word, but the silence roared. Later that evening, as the gym emptied, Marcus returned to room 2D. The bridge model was gone. So were the poems, the napkins with scribbled equations. But on the door, someone had taped a printed sign. Mr. Bennett's room, where questions matter. He touched the paper gently, then went inside. On the desk lay a single piece of chalk. He picked it up, drew a small dot at the center of the board. Then beneath it he wrote, From here, anything can grow. He set the chalk down, walked to the window. Outside, the school was dark, but the stars, they were just beginning to show.